right, Joey. Thanks for being here, dude. How's things on your side of the pond out there in California, man?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Yeah,
Yeah.
we are just like we were discussing a little bit before. We got some fires. I think we're on the way out now, but this year the fire season really wasn't as bad. There was a huge one, I guess, on the Oregon California border. Probably, I think it was the biggest fire ever, or something that they were saying. And we got some of that smoke, but it wasn't too bad. But last summer was definitely worse. We had all the raining down of all the fired stuff. We'd wake up in the morning, go out to the car, and it was just piles of it around on the car.
Yeah, I could imagine that. We've never lived in anything like that. I think we had maybe a slight hurricane come through my way, but other than that, it was a small one. So
You guys get more of the humidity and the rain and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
we get all four seasons where I'm at, but randomly here, like Mother Nature's been picking up, and was it last week or 2 weeks ago? We actually had a tornado touchdown, which I think it wasn't a big one, obviously, but that's rare. Like I've been here 35 some years, and
Do you guys have basements? Do you guys have basements out
yeah,
there?
most people have basements or crawl spaces or stuff, but no one's ever really prepared for tornadoes. And
Yeah.
like I said, like we've had a small hurricane. I remember growing up, and it was I don't even remember which one, but other than that, it was just a lot of rain and some flooding. But
Right.
But anyway, so you were in Fresno, right? And what's in your background? So you played baseball at Fresno. Have you been there your whole life and all that good stuff? Let's start talking there.
Yeah, whole life, born and raised.
Okay.
Started playing ball way back in when I was 6, 7 years old. Played soccer about the same time. So soccer, baseball were my two sports, but I loved baseball and started off. One of my first baseball cards was Don Mattingly, the first baseman for the Yankees at the time. And then I just loved the color of the A's. They're the only green team in the big leagues. and it was around that time, 88, 89, when the Dodgers played the A's in the World Series and Kirk Gibson hit that game winner home run where he had the gimpy leg and he's hobbling around the bases. So that really sparked my interest in baseball. And I ended up playing baseball Fresno State, played from little league all the way through, played 4 years at Fresno State. So it was a blast.
What position were you?
So I was an outfielder.
Okay.
I loved center field. I was the quarterback of the outfield. And what's interesting about center field is I can call anybody off. I could even call a catcher off. That's the rules of the game. If I can get to that ball, which isn't going to happen, but the center fielder has the best view, has the bird's eye view of the whole field,
sure,
and will get the longest look of the ball that's in the air.
I never thought about that. I mean, I only played baseball up to 8th grade, but yeah, I didn't never realize you're quarterback of the outfield, man. That's
you got to cover ground. And I loved running. So you had to cover your right fielder and your left fielder, and you got to cover up and back. And, you don't have to deal with tail like a right fielder, left fielder does. When a ball comes off the bat, a lot of times the hitter, it tails towards a line. So the side outfielders, right and left fielders, have to open up towards the line. Like, with their feet, they got to open up towards the line because most likely the ball is going to banana towards the foul line. And as a center fielder, I didn't really have to deal with that. I got most of the straight balls unless it was really windy or something weird like that.
Yeah, I got you. So was Fresno the only school you were looking at, or were you getting recruited by other schools?
Yeah. So I would actually just talk to a couple of my hitters about this recently, that because some of them are getting recruited now, they're seniors in high school or juniors, and we're getting them ready to start putting some feelers out there. And I wasn't being recruited by anybody. I did pretty well my junior year, and I had a couple coaches that really got behind me, and I had a couple buddies who had signed early in November, our senior year. And we did I think it was January, it was right before our season was going to start. We did gathered a group of guys that hadn't signed yet, that were some decent prospects in the Valley. And we went up to San Jose, which is about 2.5 hours from Fresno, up in the kind of Bay Area, Santa Clara, San Francisco area. And we did a little kind of camp-ish clinic. It was too much rain. We couldn't really be outside. So we went into indoor cage, and there were some scouts. There were some, not pro scouts per se, but D1 college scouts that came. So after that meeting, I was starting to get offers from one, Fresno State, because my head coach in high school was Fresno State alumni. So he helped kind of push my name over there.
Nice.
University of San Francisco, Loyola Marymount, which is kind of Santa Barbara. Yeah. Loyola.
Yeah. Is that for basketball, I think?
Yeah. Loyola Marymount. I think they're pretty good in basketball.
Yeah,
Catholic
tournament like a year or two ago or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're kind of Santa Barbara-ish. I mean, beautiful area, Catholic university, private university, and then University of Reno in Nevada. And so it was pretty much those schools that were coming after me, which is kind of cool. It went from 0 to 4. And I decided on Fresno State because they had we had 2,000 to 3,000 at a game. I mean, there was such a following, and I loved the coaches at University of San Francisco, Coach Kanishi, and I think it was Giramonte was the other guy. Come to find out, they ended up in Hawaii, University of Hawaii. So if I would have signed with USF, which their crowds were minuscule. I mean, they had those metal bleachers that could probably seat maybe 30 to 40. And they had 2 of those. That was all they had for seating at San Francisco because they had no room to build a stadium. So I love the field. I love the city at the time. It's kind of gone by way of gross. I wouldn't even take my family there now, but at the time, beautiful, beautiful city, loved it. But there was going to be nobody there to come watch our games. And anyway, those coaches ended up at University of Hawaii, who we played in our league. Fresno State played. We'd go over there and we'd play we'd go over there for 4 or 5 days and we'd play, or actually we'd go over there for a week. We'd play University of Hawaii, and then we would go and play, what was the other one? It was on the other side of the island that we'd play Hilo, University of Hawaii Hilo. Okay. And so I'm taking BP, and Coach Kanishi comes walking up to me, and he's like, "Hey, Joe, what's going on, man?" I was like, "What the hell? You're over here now?" I wish you were over here recruiting me. I would have probably come to Hawaii
for sure, man. Just playing in Hawaii would have been badass, I'm sure. But all right, so you just said that you're hitters. So what did you mean by that? So you're helping them recruit and stuff, or get recruited?
Yeah. So I work with hitters, like private, small private group lessons. And we do between 2 to 4 to 6 hitters in a group. And we just keep it private. We get to work on like what their swing, what they need to work on. It's not like we do a blanket teach because it's a group. We get to dig into each of their swings in a session. So I have a lot of junior hires and high schoolers right now. I only work with 11-year-olds all the way up through, up 11 plus.
Okay.
The younger ones, I have a hitting apprentice, which I call him, and he works with the young ones. So as they get into that junior year, sophomore to junior year, we start talking about their recruiting process and how they're going to self-promote themselves and reach out to some of these coaches and what questions to ask so that they know how to put a video montage together of their performances. So that they're tailoring the video to the specific coach of what they're looking for when they're evaluating players.
Is that what coaches are looking for now? Is you send me like a private YouTube link of your highlight reel? And
yeah, especially with COVID and all the cut down on the recruiting that's happened. And I think there's still a little bit of a haze. There's a fog of war on the recruiting side because of all this, because we don't know what's going to happen, especially in California. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
So players, I tell them, I say, you can't be reactive. You have to be proactive. You have to go out and you have to do things that other players aren't going to be doing or don't know how to do. And in baseball and softball, similar, but in baseball, the coaches have specific ideologies when it comes to hitting. And some coaches really like the hitters that hit the dingers and the doubles, and that's all they shoot for, which, we don't teach that per se. My hitters know how to do that, but we're more of a moderation. We look for the line drive type of thing. So some coaches, even though some like that, other coaches absolutely hate that. They would rather a hitter hit more line drives, hit more hard ground balls. So I tell my hitters, you have to know what programs you're going into, what you're getting yourself into. And you'll know that by that initial connection. You'll call or you'll email or reach out on social media or whatever it is to make that first connection. And your first question is, how do you evaluate players? How do you evaluate hitters? How do you evaluate fielders? For the ones that pitch to, how do you evaluate your pitchers? And then once you get that answer back, now you know what kind of video to tailor for that specific coach. Instead of what they were doing in the past, the players, is they were putting this video montage together, covering all bases, showing them hit to opposite, all the fields, hitting them doubles and dingers. They were doing everything, just basically throwing spaghetti on the wall, hoping something was going to stick. But you could put something in that video that the coach doesn't like, and it turns them off. And you don't want to do that. You want to have options, right? That's what I tell them. You want to make sure you have options.
Yeah. So if you're a skill player, you would actually want to show more of that technique and that repertoire, I guess, or arsenal, whatever you have in your tool bag for what a coach can see.
Yeah, if you're fast, you get somebody clocking you and have it on video doing the like in baseball, it's the 60-yard dash, which is probably the dumbest thing because you never run 60 yards, which times 3, 180 feet. That's never really you're never going to run that kind of a thing. It'd be better if we ran a 40-yard, more like football, and even better would be a 30-yard would be more. But baseball is so old when it comes to dinosaur mode and the brain. If you've seen Moneyball, you know how that is. Yeah.
Well, how'd you get this practice going? I mean, was this something like out of high school or not out of college you decided to get going, or was this recent or?
So this goes all the way back to probably 2005. So I started after I finished at Fresno State. I was done. I was burnt out mentally and just I wasn't getting recruited either. Pretty mediocre into the season, but I got hit by a fastball. I never broke a bone in my life and chipped that ulnar bone right here. Damn. And put me in just a forearm cast. Wasn't too bad, but I couldn't rotate this way without a bunch of pain. So it took me out for 6 weeks, and that was just the nail in the coffin. And it took me about, my wife and I were dating at the time. It took me about 6 months. We went and studied abroad in Italy because we both had wanted to do that our whole life and just didn't have the time because my wife was working a lot while she was in school and I had baseball. So we didn't have that time. So we went to Italy where there was really no there is baseball, but there's no baseball there. They love soccer. That's their thing. But there's baseball. It's like, it's not really there. So, it was nice break away and take a deep breath and come back. And then I started teaching at a local batting cage where they had camps and things like that in the summer. And so I started hand my card out to people. And so that's how it basically started. And then over the years, it took a couple years and I started to teach based on what we say applying human movement principles validated by science to hitting a ball. So we started looking at physics and biomechanics and engineering principles. And we started to reverse engineer the swing. And I kind of set aside my ego and what I had learned growing up and went more of the science route and see how these principles applied. And so once I started doing that, my hitter base started just exploding because what I was doing before wasn't working as consistently as when we started bringing the science into it. And once I started bringing that into it, we started having hitters they'd weigh 60 pounds, 67 pounds, hitting the ball 180 feet, which is tripling their body weight in batted ball distance. We had guys that were 115 to 130 pounds, hitting the ball 360, 400 feet. And so the word got out. Other coaches started teaching the same thing. They started getting the same, if not better results with their hitters. And then from there, I mean, it just exploded.
So when you say, let's break this down a little bit, just for, I know a little bit about biomechanics. I have a background in kinesiology, but so it's like, when you talking about like functional movement screening and you were just telling, people how to move their bodies and like, let's break down. That's a real vague term, I know, but I haven't thought it in a while, but so let's break that down a little bit. Because that's kind of your background is corrective movements too, right?
Exactly. Okay. So most of mine, and I wish if I would have done it over in college, instead of being a criminology law enforcement major, I probably would have been a kines major. Okay. It would have been probably much more. I mean, I enjoy criminology, but it wasn't as enjoyable, I think, than if there was a kines. So I started that journey getting just a normal PT, not physical therapy, but personal training degree from NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. Sure. And then from there, I really found the niche. I got yoga certified. You just mentioned functional muscle screen. I got certified in that. I got certified from NASM in corrective exercise science, specialist and just a couple other alphabet soup, certifications, as out there. Oh yeah. And so I really, really loved the corrective side of things. I loved getting clients in, whether they were athletes or just normal run of the mill clients that were coming in to lose weight. And we'd work on if they had a bad wheel, the bad knee or ankle, had a tight ankle or immobile hip or shoulder, whatever, that functional muscle screen FMS, that really opened my eyes to the potential for athletes and normal people to improve their movement. So we say move better to perform better. And so I took that same discipline, we moved it in with our hitters. And now we got a hitter who maybe couldn't get into a certain hitting position because of his ankles or her ankles. And we'd start working and mobilizing their ankles or their hip or their shoulder. And so since then, I think the biggest rabbit hole that I went down was, are you familiar with like the springy fascia like Thomas Myers anatomy trains.
I've heard of that part, but not the springy fascia part.
Yeah, so I call it springy fascia, but
okay.
Thomas Myers book anatomy trains, and I'm sure we're related at some point on the family tree, but I don't know him.
Oh,
we don't have family reunions or anything. We got share the same last name. He's out of Maine, and my son was born. He was like a year old, or not even a year old yet. My wife was nursing him, and she made me stay up when she was up at all ends of the morning, getting up 6 times in the morning. So for whatever reason, I was trying to fix a tightness, a chronic tightness in the inside of my right knee. And I was just searching on Amazon. I don't know how I just happened on his book, but I grabbed it. Maybe it was the last name, and his book, like, opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And that rabbit hole went really deep, and it branched out once I got below the ground. And that is the big thing that was a springboard for the system.
Yeah.
And that fascia side in Thomas Myers, he's I guess they call him body workers, a Rolfer. So Rolfing, is it Rolfing.org? ROL, kind of sounds like Rolfing, like throwing up, but it's not. It's the opposite. It's like make you better, right? But Rolfing.org, I think, is what their thing is. And I got with a Rolfing specialist for a gal that's close, that worked on my body for like almost 2 years to unwind all the bad habits and all the bad stuff that baseball did. And so that rabbit hole went super far and deep. And at the time, I think 2013 or 14 is when I started going down that rabbit hole. And since then, like I said, everything just exploded, and things made sense to me a lot more. It was frustrating because other coaches out there didn't see it.
Yeah.
And even in the strength conditioning world, they didn't see it until a couple of years later. I started hearing some other coaches on the pitching side of things, not so much on the hitting, but on the pitching, start talking about terms like spinal engine and fascia. And I was like, oh, people are starting to get the idea of the power of this stuff. And it's not so much like strength conditioning. I love strength conditioning. The problem with it is if you don't go to the root source of the issue, if you don't go to the hip for hip mobility issue or shoulder mobility issue, there's going to be a plateau for that athlete. They are not going to be able to lift past a certain amount. And if they try to, there's going to be injury. And so what's nice about the fascia stuff and the spinal engine stuff is it's how our bodies are geared to move. And so it's not only high performance movements that we talk about, but safe.
Yeah.
So we're not blowing lower backs out. We're not wearing holes in knees and, things like that. And so I think with the young kids, that's huge, especially with the girls.
Oh yeah. I mean, I coach CrossFit, a couple of times a week on the side. So I don't know if I told you that earlier, but
no,
you're just surprised that, people think they can move, but when you actually start watching them just do a simple body weight squat, you're just, it's like, I thought you said you could move. And obviously you can't say that out loud, but yeah, then you start, but it's amazing the differences when you start putting people in the correct positions and like, hey, maybe we should try this out or warm up, do a little stretching right beforehand. Like what just a little bit can, make a difference, I guess. And like you just said that, I don't know if a lot of people realize, or I hope a lot of people do realize, but, with baseball, a lot of the, core power is going to come from your core with hitting and just throwing the ball. Yeah. And just building that up as opposed to trying to bench press 315 multiple times. I mean, you're more just doing by, I guess mimicking that sport movement right there.
Yeah. And, CrossFit's come a long ways because in the beginning, I love CrossFit like everybody in the beginning, but it was almost like you have a misaligned front end on your car and you have to buy new tires for it. And the tire guy says, well, you're going to get 80,000 miles on these tires, but with that front end misaligned, we probably need to correct that because without correcting it, you're going to get about 40,000 miles on them. Right. And so I think in the beginning, CrossFit didn't really have a big focus on corrective movement. And I know you probably know Dr. Kelly Starrett.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm CISO of CrossFit, right?
Range of motion guy. Yeah.
Range of motion.
Yeah.
PT, right? He brought the physical therapy side to CrossFit.
Oh,
and I love his stuff. And I was eating that stuff up too. And I think he was probably one of the pioneers, one of the, top 5 pioneers in the beginning with CrossFit to bring that into CrossFit. And I think, I don't know, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think CrossFit's really come around in that side. And it's probably even safer now than maybe any other discipline if people aren't going through that.
Yeah, I agree. It has come a long way just because, Kelly Starrett put that in there. Then they hired, Mike Bergner to actually teach, Olympic weightlifting classes. And actually, they brought in other kettlebell people to actually, hey, you should move a kettlebell like this instead of just, here's a kettlebell, go do whatever you want with it.
Mm-hmm.
But, then they brought in sort of their own yoga called Ramwad.
Yep.
Range of motion wad. And so, and it's just like anything else. Yeah, it probably started out. That's maybe why it got the bad name in the beginning, just because somebody would write on the board, here's the workout, 21 thrusters, 21 pull-ups, good luck. And then that's how people got hurt, and that's what got the bad name. And
right.
And so, but again, it's just like everything else. There's a science to this shit. Like you were saying, man. I mean, if you read the books and sit down and like you were talking about, I mean, you can actually see that people just don't make this up. There's a method to the madness, So.
And you have to have a passionate curiosity for it. And that's what I always like talking to people. And any discipline doesn't have to be CrossFit, doesn't have to be baseball, whatever. But you can tell those that have a passionate curiosity, and they would, if they had $100 million in the bank, this is what they would do, right? Mm-hmm. They would wake up in the morning and that's what they would do. And they are looking for answers. They're critical thinkers. They're good. We all make mistakes, but they're good discerners. Like they have good discernment, right? So knowing who to follow and what effectiveness means, right? Doing the right things. Well, what are those right things? Sure. Like, how do you find those? And who can you trust with that information? And you start going up the ladder and finding, instead of like in baseball, our biggest problem was when before I started bringing this stuff into it, was that people were just trusting former major leaguers, Hall of Famers. And there's a lot of good stuff that those guys say, especially when it comes to the feel side of things. I think they're world-class when it comes to feel, like feel cues and coaching cues, that kind of thing when it comes to movement. But they don't really know what they're doing. They have no clue how to teach it and what they're doing. And that's okay, because they probably don't teach it. They've never taught it before. And so that was the thing that we were battling in the beginning, was that these coaches would say, well, how many base hits or how many home runs did you hit in the big leagues? Or what was it? Dr. Serge Grakowetsky, who was he coined the term, the spinal engine. He has got a book called The Spinal Engine. It's really good. I probably understood about 20% of it. He's a physicist and electrical engineer. So you could just imagine the kind of jargon that he's talking. A lot of studies, he's self-study stuff, putting studies together himself, experiments, all that kind of thing. And that's what they would say. I would mention Dr. Serge Grakowetsky, and I'd maybe give a quote or whatever, or a diagram, demonstrate whatever, showing him a video. And they say, well, how many base hits did Dr. Serge get in the big leagues? Wait a minute, dude. We gotta look at this from a different angle, because from what I was seeing, and not only what I was seeing, but when I was working with hitters, it wasn't working. It wasn't consistent. And so I think people had such a hard time believing what we were doing and what my hitters were doing and what my coaches' hitters were doing. They were having a hard time believing it because they'd never seen it, because what they were teaching was garbage. And it wasn't consistent, right? And so baseball has just been so far behind with everything. Golf's been a lot better. They're probably about a decade ahead of the baseball world, baseball softball world. But
well, that's probably because of Tiger Woods. I mean, he actually was one of the only ones who's actually started weightlifting and stuff that I remember. And I think that's what, obviously he was out there just before he went down his problems, I guess. But he was out there. Yeah. He was doing all the weightlifting thing. And I think that's what attracted other golfers and saying, hey, maybe we should get on this weightlifting or strength or whatever you want to call it, strength and conditioning. So I don't really know exactly what he does, but I know he was lifting there for a little bit. But
and with him, the tragedy, I think it was the blessing and the curse was getting back into the corrective exercise part of stuff. I think that he got really into the strength conditioning, just like I did in college. I mean, it was curls for girls, right? We wanted to look good, but those muscles didn't necessarily translate to the baseball field, right? But hey, it was to get chicks, and that was what it was all about. Right? And so Tiger Woods, I mean, you remember, he was thick. He turned sideways, and I mean, he was thick, and you're like, dude,
shape for sure.
Yeah, the V. But that maybe not necessarily good for golf. I mean, I don't know what he was doing, but I do know all the injuries that followed that. I mean, he had lower back issues, he had knee issues. I mean, he had surgeries on, I think, both of those. And so you got to think about, okay, well, what are you doing in the weight room? And is that helping you on the greens?
Yeah. Well, do you think it was just over the repetitive time of him just doing that swing, that's what did it instead of the weight room, and that's why it went down that road? Or maybe it was just a combination of both. It was just this overuse.
Well, think about, in baseball, we have a problem in softball because I was a righty hitter, righty thrower, right? You do that in the weight room. If you go in the weight room and just do bicep curls with your right arm, do 50 reps with your right arm and go home. I mean, nobody does that. You do both equally, right?
Sure.
So, but in baseball and softball, and this is my opinion, I don't feel like switch hitting or switch throwing gives you a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
You have some switch hitters that do pretty well, and maybe you can argue that it adds 20 points to your batting average or whatever. But you have to do as many swings as you do right-handed as left-handed. You have to do as many throws right-handed as you do left-handed. Who the hell has that kind of time? Sure. I mean, practices are already 2 hours. Are we going to make them 4 hours because we're doing all that extra time on both sides? So there's no equality when it comes to movement in those sports. But what baseball has an advantage of over golf is that golf is always in one spot on the inclined plane. It's always one spot. The ball is always on the ground.
That's a good point.
And with baseball and softball, you have a differing inclined plane, right? There's pitches up in the zone. There's pitches down in the zone. So there is a little bit of change there. But in golf, I think it's so one-sided dominant and only one type of movement that I don't think there's enough of the other way. So if Tiger Woods being a righty, going lefty, the same amount of swings, he probably just doing that, he might have not had the same amount of issues. Maybe he did that. I don't know. I don't know what his training was, but I'm just guessing at how the body, how the body is. It loves balance, balance. Yeah. And when there's imbalance in a joint, you're going to have some issues. You're going to have a restricted side and you're going to have an overpowering side. And then they're going to be fighting each other in that joint. And eventually, if you push them too much, that joint's you're going to wear a hole in the joint. As Kelly Starrett says, you're going to wear a hole in your back.
No, that's a good point. I have a friend, he does CrossFit too, and he goes to another gym. But anyway, he sent me a video saying that he's like, hey, can you see anything wrong? And he was doing an overhead squat, and he had a complete hip shift movement to the right in the bottom of the squat.
Asymmetric.
Yeah. And he said, I don't know what the hell happened, but just he woke up one day and it was just, he started doing that. Normally he's real competitive and everything, but he just in pain, man. And he actually had to go see a OT or PT for it. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah. And did you do the functional muscle screen?
I did it once, and I used to work in our recreation center on campus, and we were actually kind of had the board on the wall. We were playing with that, and I was just, I didn't have nobody really teach me because nobody at that time really knew how to actually do it. But yeah, I played with it.
Are you familiar with I don't know if your buddy's is he still suffering from the asymmetrical squat?
I didn't even follow up with him, but I know he went and talked to somebody, and I think it's got I don't know. I can look for the text and what he sent me, but.
Well, one thing that's interesting with the functional muscle screen that I learned, I actually use the same technique with my hitters, and it's called reactive neuromuscular training, RNT. Yeah. So the idea is to feed the mistake, right? And when you feed the mistake, so your buddy is sliding the hips to one side, to the left or to the right. And so if you take a band and you wrap it around his waist and pull him to that side, pull him to the side that he's asymmetrically squatting to. So if he's squatting to the left, get on that left side of him, wrap the bands around his waist and start pulling him that way. And he has to resist you the other way. So that's,
okay. I've seen that.
You seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it works really good. And that I learned that from fitness. I learned that from functional muscle screen, and I took that to my hitters. So we have a drill called the hands drop drill. So if my hitters hands drop all the way down to their waist, and then they start their turn, well, that leaves them vulnerable to pitches up in the zone, right? Pitchers just throw hard stuff up, and then there's no way they can get to it and hit it hard. So what we do is we have Jaeger bands that like those bands I'm talking about, but they have a wrist thing wrist Velcro that you can put it around the wrist. You put it around the wrist, and then on the other end, you can with a carabiner, you can attach to a fence, and they do a lot of like arm exercises for pitchers and stuff. So we have them step on with their back foot, step on the V part of the band, and they got their wrists, so they can hold their bat. And so they practice getting to their landing position, their stride landing, while those bands are pulling the hands down, and they have to resist it. They can't let the bands pull their hands down.
I like that.
And I'm telling you, dude, it corrects it within a session or two. It's crazy.
Yeah, like your body just automatically starts like muscle memory, just.
It sends a signal to the brain and then after they do it a couple times that physically do that drill, we don't almost have to do it for a while, because then I can trigger that using a coaching cue. I can say, hey, fight those hands getting pulled down, fight them. And so they already have that clear signal from doing it physically a few times. And then all I got to do is just verbally cue it, and they got it.
Yeah. This is what my buddy texted me right here. I got it for you.
Yeah.
He said he fixed my hips, no problem. They were slightly out of alignment with my hip flexor was strained because my sacrum was tilted and twisted.
Oh.
So he says you need to focus on his posterior. So for his job, he drops a lot. So I think.
Yep.
Okay. Shout out.
He's
Chad.
got it. Yeah. Yeah. He's got an anterior pelvic tilt, and they're trying to posteriorly, like we always talk about the hips are a bowl, or the pelvis is a bowl of water, right?
Yeah.
And so when it's anterior, you're spilling water on your feet. When it's posterior, you're spilling water on your heels. And you want when you're anterior, a lot of the sitters, drive truck, cops, possibly firefighters and stuff, they tend to sit a lot. So and the students, the kids in school and stuff, they sit a lot. So doing a lot of hamstring stuff, like the single leg Romanian deadlifts or the regular deadlifts, or that kind of thing. Posterior chain stuff is beautiful, and they start walking upright. They look good,
Oh yeah, flexing out there. So I was listening to a podcast, and it had Terrence Kennel. I think he's a strength and conditioning guy for the Astros, and he was actually talking about if you're a baseball player, do you have to be an athlete to actually play baseball? Or can you just, like we were talking about earlier, or can you just develop the skills and hopefully become that athlete? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. Yeah, I agree with them. So what I tell my hitters or my parents, my coaches, is when the kids are younger, the sports that you want them to be in, aside from baseball and other sports like football and whatever, the other things you want them to be in is, I just found out parkour, American Ninja Warrior stuff, right? Everybody knows American Ninja Warrior. So we had our son and daughter in gymnastics when they were younger. They did that for a couple years. And then a couple of the gymnastics plays shut down here. So we got them into parkour because they were the only place open. And it was in a city in Clovis, which is it's probably about 15, 20 minutes north of Fresno. And they were a little bit more open to a little bit more conservative. So they were more open. So we went there. So parkour, American Ninja Warrior, yoga is always good. You just don't get the explosion with yoga. You just get more range of motion with that.
Okay.
But martial arts is another really good one, because a lot of the kicks that you're doing, and it has to be martial arts, it has to be like karate or taekwondo. There needs to be some sort of kicking involved. Whereas Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you're not going to get a lot of that. A lot of BJJ, you're in tight, right? You're always in tight. You got people on you. You're doing different things. So you're not. I mean, there's punching involved, but
it's more grappling and submissive type. Right?
Exactly. So you get with karate, taekwondo, kenpo, some of the traditional ones, you get more of the hip. You're working the hip in all kinds of different positions with the leg, right? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that swim can be good, but swim's good for the shoulder because you get full range of motion in the shoulder with swim, right? Not as much in the legs. But there's other swim. I'm not a swim guy, but there's other swim things, right, that you can do to get some hip stuff in there. But that's what I say. So have a discipline that's outside of your sport, especially if you're playing baseball, softball, golf, maybe even tennis, because that can be argued as it's a one side dominant, but you do backhand. So you do turn the opposite direction versus your forehand. Right. But yeah, that athlete type thing. I mean, I think that should be your base. That should be your foundation. You shouldn't, I don't like when my hitters are playing just baseball for their whole life. Yeah. Like you need other CrossFit, weight room stuff too, as long as in the weight room, they're doing mobility work and stability work along with that's comes around their strength conditioning programming. So weight room stuff's always good too, is just as long as they're getting that mobility, stability side. Yeah, but I agree with them.
Yeah. You can develop a lot of different skills just doing other different sports and hopefully transfer it over. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. Basketball, right? You learn skills in basketball. Like I played soccer. So soccer, and I did martial arts for 3 years. I did like a mixed martial arts. So we did a little bit of everything before it was mixed martial arts, before it was called mixed martial arts. Sure. It just seemed like rational logic that you'd want to learn different disciplines of martial arts, because grappling is going to help you. Like Bruce Lee said, what did he say? 90% of fights end up on the ground anyway. So, Brazilian jiu-jitsu might be good. Or, we have a 5-year-old daughter who, again, this is what I think about. I think about how she's going to protect herself. And if I put her in a karate type class or taekwondo, where she's learning how to punch, she's learning how to kick, trying to kick people in the face, The problem is she could be bowing up on a dude that's like 6'4". Like, what if some 6'4" dude? I don't know how tall you are, Chris, but you got some weight on you. I mean,
I'm about 5'6", 5'7" on a tall day.
Okay, all right. So maybe if she gets to be some sort of height, she can get you in the nose. But as dads, we have to think about the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
So what are girls that are going to be smaller? What are their best shot? And I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is perfect for girls. Because what's going to happen? They're going to come up. A dude's going to come up behind them or in front of them and bear hug them, or they're going to try and put them in a hold. And if the girl knows how to put them in an elbow lock, or choke them out, or put their leg in a compromising position, or know how to hit that leg in a way that's going to disarm this guy, and they can run for help. So
exactly.
Whatever the skills that you're looking to gain, basketball again, you have a lot of eye-hand coordination, you have spatial awareness, right? So for me as an outfielder, basketball, I played basketball. I didn't play it officially and in a league, but I played for like 3 years with my buddies on the street. We had a buddy had a hoop and we played each other. And, I wasn't good in the beginning, but I got pretty good as we went, but that helped me in spatial awareness in the outfield. So I had a good idea of the height of the ball. So I could get to that spot. Or if I was going back on a ball, chasing a ball to the wall, I could understand kind of where that wall was, if, we're based on spatial awareness of everything. So yeah, multiple sports are great, but you also need a foundation that's going to move your body in as many different positions as possible so that you're not in an imbalanced state, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. You got to build a foundation and kind of go off that. And I mean, that's kind of what we kind of, I guess, teach in CrossFit. We teach like the smaller, like non-basic movements, especially with Olympic weightlifting, and then we get that basis down that people can actually do that. Then, like you were saying, then we build off into the other.
Yeah, you start doing power cleans.
Oh yeah,
the clean and jerks. Yeah. So, those are the fun ones, man.
Oh yeah, man.
But you can't get there. I was talking to one of my hitters. I think they were going over cleans, and I asked him, "Are you guys doing cleans?" And he said, "No, not yet." I said, "Are you doing kettlebell swings yet?" Or deadlifts. Yeah. And he said, yeah, after I was questioning, I don't think he knew what they were called. He just, hey, do this. And he just does it. He doesn't know what they're called.
Okay.
I said, okay, you doing a deadlift? You doing a hex bar deadlift? You doing a regular one? And we were walking through it and he said, yeah, we're doing a regular deadlift. And I said, are you doing a hang clean or like a hang shrug, where you float up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He said, we're doing that. And I said, are you doing a front squat? Because that's your catch position, and so that's what you do. Like you're talking about, you take those pieces or smaller pieces. And then once they got those movements and those pieces, now you can work into a clean. Now you can get them actually getting under and catching the bar like they're supposed to.
Of course. So we're talking about with all the fitness stuff here that I was also kind of referring back to this podcast I was listening to with that strength conditioning coach. That you ever seen the movie Tom Selleck, Mr. Baseball?
Oh, I love it.
And he says we're not athletes, we're baseball players.
Yeah, I love it. My favorite movie.
That's a good movie. But anyway, so Albert Pujols, for example, would you say he was in shape to play baseball? I mean, how good a shape do you really need to be to play baseball?
He's a hard worker. I was surprised recently. They looked like he put on a little weight, and it wasn't good weight, right?
Yeah, I saw it last night. He hit a home run for the Dodgers now.
How'd he look to you?
Look a little thick.
Look thick. Yeah.
Like THICK, not like girl thick,
No, not at all. Yeah, guy thick. He's got the dad belly and he's got the thing, But that's pretty normal for those guys as they get up in years. I think he's got to be close to his late 30s, early 40s now. Yeah, so he's getting older. But when he was with the Cardinals, even early on with the Angels, he was in pretty good shape. And I think what happens as they get older, if they're not allowed, which with the PED thing's a whole other can of worms we can talk about. I'm okay with PEDs. I'm okay with steroids or HGH or whatever it is. Number one, it needs to be doctor recommended and prescribed, number one. And number two, it needs to be controlled. So there needs to be a control of, and I've heard this, and I could be wrong, but I've heard that it's actually steroids, HGH, whatever is in the Olympics. So Olympic athletes are allowed to take these performance enhancers, more recovery, right? Okay. They're allowed to take it, but there's only a certain threshold that they can take. If they take too much of it, that's when they get busted. Now I could be wrong on that, But I heard this from a friend of mine who's a retired podiatrist, foot doctor, who understands all the fascia, spinal engine, massage. Like he understands all that side of it. He has a Olympic judge buddy that told him that. So I could be wrong, but I believe that these guys and gals that are playing these sports, and particularly baseball, where it's a grind, 162 games. They start in April. And this is what these armchair quarterbacks don't understand. They say, oh, these idiots, they're taking PEDs and bonds. He's a cheater and all this stuff. Like these guys don't understand the grind that these guys go through from April. And if they're lucky, all the way through to October. Mm-hmm. They have no clue what a grind that is physically. Yeah. Right. So you're talking 5-6 months where it's just constant, 162 games. So you cannot nutritionally maybe, but you'd have to be very fanatical every single day to get away with proper recovery through nutrition with that kind of a grind. Like let the athletes take these, a certain threshold of steroids or HGH or whatever it is that the doctors decide is okay. Sure. Allow them to recover. Like we're paying good money now at San Francisco Giants ballpark. I mean, I haven't been there in a while, but I would guess that it's probably $40 per family member that goes to that game. If you buy a hot dog, you buy a $20 beer, or you ticket, it might even be more than that per. More. It's crazy, right? Yeah. And so we're paying good money to see these guys perform. Why not allow them a certain threshold of recovery agent? I just don't, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that, I have heard that with the pandemic, that people who, like you said, the grind, when they're just traveling to different time zones, going to different cities, not every night with baseball, obviously, but, every 3 to 4 days, just the traveling aspect of it would just grind on them and having to change up their sleep patterns. And yeah, I mean, that takes a toll on your body, just like you just said, like after time over time. So
yeah, and then if you look at Pujols, and this was probably maybe 3-4 years ago, he was having a big problems with plantar fasciitis in his foot. Oh. And for those that have had it, it is horrible, or had it in their heel, right? I don't know if you've ever dealt with it. A lot of females get it because I think the high heels. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the calf because it's supposed to bulk that calf up, right? Make it look nice and plump and juicy, And so that calf gets super strong, but then the shin muscle gets super weak. So it creates that imbalance in that ankle joint. And so what happens as they get older and they're not wearing those heels anymore, they got the imbalance still, and maybe even is worse, travels up to the knee, into the hip. Now they develop plantar fasciitis in the arch of the foot. Right. You got that from the back of the ball of the foot to the heel, if not over the heel, and attaching into the Achilles tendon. So the Achilles tendon gets really taxed on that kind of a thing. So Pujols was getting a lot of problems with plantar fasciitis, and it was painful to watch him run from home plate to first base with plantar fasciitis, because I've never had it in my plantar fascia, but I've had it in my heel, and I've had turf toe before, and they're all interrelated. You can treat them in similar fashions, but he was having those issues. He was having some lower back issues, and what happens is you get to an age and you're like, you know what, F it. I don't need to be training anymore. I'd rather have the lobster with the butter, and I'd rather have the pasta,
Oh yeah. Eating, steak and lobster every night. I mean, I can understand that, just because it goes to a point that, and I've kind of related, had this own talk with myself lately, that, constantly eating, if you want to say clean, every day or 6 days a week with only maybe 1 or 2 cheat meals, and just over time, just takes a toll on you. And just like, hey, some days, man, just like you said, I'm eating lobster tonight with butter. And just, I don't know if it's burnout or what, but.
Well, you're a single guy, right? And you're going to have kids someday. And so what happens is you get it's not called the dad bod for nothing. You you have kids, and they screw up I slept so good before kids. And that, I tell you, it took about a year of meditation of the Headspace app. It took me about a year to get my sleep back, to be able to get myself back to sleep. Like that screwed me up. So that whole year of no sleep, I mean, I'll tell you what, the motivation to work out, to wake up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. goes away. You'd rather get sleep. Right. So just the fact, and I love my old clients that would come in, my female clients that would just have a baby, and they'd come in, like once they were cleared by the doc, they're in working out, and they work out hard. And I can completely appreciate those clients now, because I understand, especially for the moms, on how hard that is to keep that motivation and inspiration to keep working out, even though you got the kids to take care of, and it's hard. 5 a.m. workouts, you know?
I mean, you got to have discipline too. I mean, just, like there's some days, I have a full-time job as well. And just when you're getting off work, just some days just like, "God damn, I don't want to go down there today." But I mean, then after I do it, I feel a lot better. But
yeah. Oh yeah.
Just putting your foot through the door. I mean, do I give 100% every day? I mean, I kind of listen to my body and just like, I think we're going on. I think that's one of the issues, like we were talking about with CrossFit earlier, that there's a mistake that people think they actually have to do 100% and almost train under fatigue every single workout, which is not necessarily, in my opinion, the case if you want to do it correctly. But we don't have to go down that road. But but I think that's almost, because you see other people who are just going in there, like we were talking about curls for the girls and stuff, but they still go back every day. But they're also hopefully, or maybe not, stressed out, or their bodies are not saying, "Hey, we're not going back there today." But But one thing I wanted to ask you real quick, why we were talking about it. So you said, obviously baseball is a 162 game season. Do you think baseball and the players would benefit more for a shorter season? Or,
yeah, that's a tough question. Yeah. I mean, now you have to justify how much they're getting paid now, right? So you start cutting down games, and then fans are going to go, whoa, wait a minute, I paid for 162 games, right? It was back in the 60s. I can't remember when they went from 152 to 162, or 156 to 162. But I think it was 50-60, somewhere around there. And I mean, even that, you just cut, what's that, a week and a half? You're adding a week and a half of games. So yeah, I would love. I bet if you ask the guys, the major leaguers, would you prefer a shorter season? I'm sure they would say yeah, but they would get so much blowback on that. They would say, "What, we're paying you this much, and you gotta play these games." So then the thing is, okay, well, and maybe it's better now. It wasn't this way when I was in college, and it wasn't this way even a decade ago. But they, like I said, they need to let those guys, again, for everybody, have a threshold. Doctors prescribe, and have certain doctors, only a certain doctors that can do it, right? Don't let anybody and their mother in on this thing, because then you get shady stuff and whatever. But that you can control and all that stuff, and let them take it. Let them take it to help them recover. Let them have, and maybe they have this, but you got psychological people in there that are helping them with the grind and be able to, like I mentioned, headspace, right? Headspace and meditation. Oh, yeah. It's such a great component, I think, for any athlete. It doesn't have to be baseball, but any desk athlete or whatever, just to be able to put up with the grind. It's tough when you get home after doing an 8-hour job, for those that are working for somebody, or especially driving. So some of the clients you're talking about, and you're tired, like you don't want to do it. And it's a whole thing
every day.
So I did for about a year or two. Yeah. For a whole year I was really, really consistent. And then sometimes 2 times a day, do like 15-minute 2 times a day. And then the second year I was a little bit more intermittent with it. But the big thing that I took out of it is the whole breath thing. So taking, like if I'm having a hard time sleeping, counting the breath, like you count, inhale is 1, exhale is 2, right? So the evens are the exhales, the odds are the inhales, and you count to 10, and then you start over, and then you do it again. You count to 10. And I always know when I'm falling asleep, when I lose count, I go, oh, I got to start over. So you start over, back to 1. And that was the thing that really, there were some other techniques that they talk about, but that one was the big one that really helped me. And so now I just do it if I need to, if I feel like I'm getting a little anxious or whatever, I just make sure that tuning into the breath and making sure you're taking a deep breath. We coach our kids on that when they get frustrated. We ask them, what do you do? What do you need to do right now? When you can see them starting to get the tears well up and their face is getting red and they're getting frustrated. We say, what do you need to do right now? And that's the cue for them that they either need to leave the room, take some deep breaths, or they take some deep breaths there. But I don't think that's being taught. Like nobody's teaching that stuff.
No, it's not. And I was going to bring up, and I'm sorry, folks, if I talked about this before, but I just read the book Breath by James Nestor. And
good one.
Yeah. Okay. You read it then? And
I haven't read it. No, but I'll pick it up.
Oh, dude. Yeah. And like, he actually talks about like how, breathing through your mouth, you're just killing yourself. And then he actually did a, I guess, I don't know if you want to say a test. Yeah. Some kind of lab test, but
experiment.
Yeah. There you go. Experiment. Or I think it was actually done by a university he did it with, but he taped up his nose for 3 months where he could not breathe out of it at all. And then he actually did in the 3 months. Then he reversed it, where he would only breathe out through his nose instead of his mouth. Even while
he was doing blood tests.
He was doing blood tests too.
Uh-huh.
And I think he did this while he was, I think he's sleeping every night. I don't think it was like 24 hours, obviously. But anyway, he was just talking about how his body would change, like his facial structure, just because of you breathing and.
Wow.
Yeah, and just it was just small things like that, and just he went into the history of it all, and yeah, it's just a great book. And at the end of it, he actually had like breathing techniques you could use, like to meditate and just it was just like for me now, like I'm subconsciously or not subconsciously, but always like, am I breathing through my nose or my mouth right now? Okay, but yeah. But
that and the other thing is tension, right? People carry their tension in their jaw, and I've had a couple instances where I've had a lot of pressure to get something done for a deadline, and I'm doing this all the time, and I'd get like a lockjaw where it was so painful to like I'll open my mouth and chew, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And I knew it was anxiety, I knew it was stress. But what do I need to do? So the other thing I do besides the breath, which is probably the most important thing, but to keep a small light gap between your molars. So to always be conscious, not only of your breath, but to keep a slight light gap when you're listening to something or whenever you realize what you're doing. And what that does is that keeps you from early chowing down on your.
I never thought of that, man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Huh. Carrying tension in your jaw. Okay.
Exactly.
I start thinking about that now. Damn.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had that before.
No, I've never. I mean, I've never even thought about it. If I have, like you just said, like sitting there doing like that. So maybe I do it. Just I'm not realizing it. So.
But if you've never had that pain, maybe you haven't. Maybe you deal. You deal with it maybe in a different way. But I just found that out once I had some pressure put on me. I was like, oh, mama. That's where I started to really clench and stuff.
Well, I know we're kind of getting close on time here, but I wanted to ask you one more thing. We're kind of going back to earlier with the recruiting thing that when you played baseball, obviously you couldn't use your name as likeness, and now that rule has changed, obviously. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. How do you feel?
That is interesting. Yeah, I saw that, been following that, and I don't know what. I guess if the guys like the NCAA, it was when I was playing, you couldn't get paid, right? I mean, you get paid in a scholarship style, where they're paying for your tuition, your books, and maybe some of your housing if you're an out of towner or whatnot. But you couldn't get paid by sponsors. You couldn't have sponsorships. And now, I mean, things have changed so much. We didn't have the internet when I was playing. Actually, we did have the internet, but it was all chat rooms. It wasn't really information unless you went to the school library and you went on their little things, right? You can look up magazines, old magazines and newspapers and whatnot. So it wasn't like it is now. So I maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. I mean, if a guy or a gal is a stud or studette and they got a Instagram following that's ridiculous, I mean, why not let them? I mean, it's their likeness, it's their thing. It would also, I think, would help free up a scholarship. I mean, I don't know, I guess you'd still give them a scholarship on top of it, but if they're making a lot of money on YouTube from YouTube ads and things like that, they're making $5,000 a month or $1,000 a month or $500 a month or whatever. I mean, that's going to help the program, possibly free up some money for another player that may not have that same benefit, but the school can pay for their like me, the school paid for my tuition going through for playing the sport, so I don't know, different times, right? Different times, different measures.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree that, I mean, it's their name if they want to make money off it and if they can do it. But I just kind of was thinking about it in a different way. If you're a walk on and you're a nobody on the team, I mean, maybe that's what you do. Maybe you hopefully get a Twitch channel and you're just a gamer, but I don't see many big brands coming after you to, actually represent them as far as, so, I mean, who's going to pay them unless you're doing the TikTok dances and you get money from that.
Right.
But yeah. I don't know. I was just trying to see like the other side of it.
Well, the other side, I think the pain of that or the downside of that would be if there was conflicting sponsorship. Right. So, the one thing that college, the NCAA doesn't want are scouts talking to athletes too soon. So we have a cousin on my wife's side who he was supposed to go between the 3rd and the 5th round this last year. He's pretty good. He's one of those special guys, but they weren't giving him enough money, the money that he wanted to go. So he had already signed with Long Beach to go play at Long Beach on a full ride.
Okay.
So he ended up going and playing there. but so his birthday, where his birthday is, the draft, they changed it from June to July. So now where his birthday's at, he's allowed to get drafted after his sophomore year in college. For me, it was after my junior year. Like you couldn't get drafted until after your junior year. And so for him, he only has to play 2 years and he gets drafted. So now schools can come in and talk to him as I think would make him his sophomore year, but there's rules on how long they can talk to him and what they can talk to him about and things like that. Just imagine if you're getting paid sponsorships and say it's the Boston Red Sox paying, like they're saying, hey, we'll pay you a certain amount of money to wear our hat and all that kind of stuff. Like that's a no-no. Like that's the downside. Like you have to be 100% for whoever you're playing for, University of Virginia or, Fresno State or whatever. You have to be 100% for that team. You can't be thinking about these other ones. What was the year? It was the 2008 season, College World Series. Fresno State had won that College World Series. That was that Cinderella season. The only time they had won the World Series. I think Aaron Judge was on that team. I think he was. So that during the World Series, or during the playoffs, I think it was the Stanford, they had the draft. I can't remember what happened, but they had the draft. A guy got drafted already and they were in the playoffs. Maybe the college season got pushed back. The World Series got pushed back, College World Series. He was already drafted. He was a pitcher, I guess. And I mean, why did he need to really compete? He's already been drafted and he got, $1 million. Like he's done. Nice. Like that's it. He's it. Like he's already going to be a big leaguer, or he's going to be a professional player. And why should he finish out the rest of his college season? And I think that's wrong. I think you need to be whatever team you're playing on right now. You're active. That needs to be your thing. So that's where I think the money and the sponsorships could be a problem if you have professional teams that are paying you for whatever, But I don't think they allow that. But that would be a problem.
That makes sense. All right. Well, other thing I wanted to touch on real quick is just that, do you think that, growing up today, if you want to say today's society or being a kid today, that if you wanted to play in college, is baseball your best way to go, or is to get recruited and to actually play and get college paid for, like we were just talking about, or would you pick another sport?
If I were to do it all over again?
If you were to do it all over again.
Oh, it's baseball. Baseball would be my thing. Yeah,
that's your passion, like you said.
I like soccer. I like soccer. I didn't love it. I did it because that was before baseball was all year round. So I played a sport that was in the off season. I knew it would get me in shape. It was always to get me in shape for baseball. Yeah. And so that's why I played soccer. I like the martial arts. I wish I would have done more in that, like the competitive side of it. We were just more training. We would test for belts and all that, but I never really got and went to tournaments and things like that. And my sensei at the time, he's still teaching and he's got a pretty big following now. And I went to lunch with him or went to breakfast with him the other day, and they're doing a lot of that now. They're doing a lot of the competitive side of things. And I don't know. I'm a big Cobra Kai fan. You've seen Cobra Kai?
Dude, it's so cheesy, but I love it, man.
I know.
I crush it when it comes out, dude.
But that kind of stuff, I missed out on that kind of stuff. We did sparring. We did all that. It was just all unofficial. There was never any winning anything, right? And I wish I would have done a little bit more of that. But I don't think you really, aside from some sort of a college academy or university academy that is specifically for martial arts, I don't think that you could get a scholarship for martial arts per se. But it would have been fun. I think that's probably the only thing I would have changed. But baseball for sure. Yeah, there's no way you could have told me to get into college with any other sport.
I agree with you there, just because where I grew up, I mean, it was literally, we didn't have baseball year all around. It was either just in season and just whoever's dad was coaching was coaching. And we didn't even have anything, martial arts academy or studios or whatever you call it, just anywhere, even within a certain, I don't know, probably 50-mile radius. So
yeah.
So it was real rural where I live. So that's kind of one thing that I think about now is that would have been fun. So if I actually would have. If I actually could have got the chance to actually go into one and just learn either karate or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or just anything, I don't know.
Have you done any of that now?
No, and that's one thing that I've been telling, well, not always, but I've been telling myself in the last year is that, because I've been doing the CrossFit thing since 2013. So what is that, 8 years? And so it's just like I'm starting to look for the next thing. Like I was talking about a little bit earlier, like I feel myself being burnt out on it.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, what's the next thing? And that, maybe, and that's always been an interest of mine. So maybe like, I don't know, it's like one of those things. I mean, is it too late to actually start it or?
No, never too late. Yeah. Cause you're still young. I went back to it. I have a good buddy who was funny. I was like a belt just below brown. I was red with a black stripe, and it was 3 years, and I was so in love with baseball. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this now full time, right? So I said farewell, retiring, from martial arts. And so my buddy, who was a white belt at the time when I was on my way out, and he stuck with it for a lot longer than I did. He became a black belt, probably times a couple degrees in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So he had asked me, this was probably back in 2013 or something like that, to come back. And at the time I had some neck issues that I ended up going to a buddy of mine who I played ball with at State. He's a chiropractor, and ended up, my neck was starting to, the vertebrae were starting to curve the opposite way. And just because, you're on your phone, all this kind of stuff, you're looking down a lot, and just from playing baseball. So, but I went in before I corrected all that. I went in with him, and he goes, "Hey, come to a class, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and free, it's on me, whatever, we'll do it." Yeah. And again, we didn't go in depth with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I was doing it. We did a bunch of different things, but we weren't in depth with it. So I know a little bit, I guess, to be dangerous, but not enough to go deep. If I went in against somebody who was a black belt in it, I'd get crushed. I'd get my ass handed to me, but I went in that class, and there was a lot of head turn, they put the head back here, and then they put the arm over here, and it just cranked my neck. And I had the worst kink in my neck for like 3 months after that. Oh, wow. So, it's a sport. It is grueling because you're putting your elbow in different positions, wrists in position. I mean, it's all, it's funny. My buddy, his name's Seo, the black belt in BJJ. We would meet for tea quite a bit. And I always talked about how to use the body in a way to maximize and optimize. Okay. He looks at the body in a way of how to break it down, how to break the body down. Right. So I talked to him about, in hitting, we don't want, as we're swinging, getting the barrel to the ball, we don't want our chin going into our chest, or that right ear going into the right shoulder, because it's what it's like is like a guillotine for the central nervous system. And so in hitting, we go away from that. But for him in BJJ, he moves his enemy into that position because it makes the body weaker. It makes it easier to manipulate. Right. Okay. So it's funny how I'm trying to optimize on the hitting side. He's trying to deconstruct, right, using the same principles, but in a different way. So my advice is make sure you're moving good before you get in, because it could be grueling. It putting the head in different neck positions, it's putting, shoulders. And so, just like CrossFit doing a clean and you got a bad shoulder, not always a good choice.
I mean, damn, even a bad wrist too, dude.
Or bad wrist. Yeah.
So, I mean, all right. So last one, I mean, you've been gracious with your time here. So somebody getting into, I train CrossFit 5 to 6 days a week. I'm always doing a workout or whatever. So with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, would you say 3 days a week, or the same amount, just to actually start seeing progress in it? Or
so what I would say is, I don't know if I would do 5 or 6 with CrossFit and then add 2 or 3 with BJJ, because you're gonna
my body
dude, those BJJ workouts, you'll be dripping with sweat, like dripping. So what I would do is I would probably go whatever you want more. If you feel like you're getting burnt out of CrossFit, I would come down to about 3 or 4 days of CrossFit a week. Okay. And then I would do the other three or 4, depending on what your decision on that for BJJ. Because you might even scale it down more. You might even say 3. I'd say 3 CrossFit and 4 BJJ, or 3 and 3, because those BJJ sessions, I'm telling you, dude, you're going to be freaking gassed.
All right. Well, that's what I've heard too by other folks I've talked about this with. So, all right, Joe, you've been gracious with your time. I appreciate it. So before we get off here, if anybody wants to find you, get more information about just you and all your businesses and all that stuff going on, how they do all that stuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So for those that are interested in the baseball side, so hittingperformancelab.com, and I got like 350 something plus free blog posts there. So if you're interested in that side of it, you can always contact, or if you want to search on Facebook, Twitter, I'm there, just Hitting Performance Lab or Joey Myers. And if you're on the business side and you're looking for search engine optimization stuff, you can go to Lead Generation SEO Services with an S at the end of that.com. And the SEO is for search engine optimization. You can go there and you can look at some different things. If you wanted to hop on a call, no charge or anything like that, we can take a look. I have a free website audit, and it gets emailed to you. You don't have to wait for me to get that back to you. So if you're interested in that, you can go reach out there. But yeah, I appreciate the time, Chris.
No, you're one cool dude, man. This was fun. I appreciate it. So
yeah.
All right, people, be good to yourselves and all that good stuff. We're out of here.
Thanks, Chris.